She didn't cry. Not when they closed the door, not when they slid the paper across. But someone in legal would hours later, because buried in the silence was a version they never meant her to see. The office didn't hum. It clicked. Keyboards, heels, doors. Each sound was short, sharp, practiced. No wasted movement. No time for warmth. I sat in conference room B, the one with the broken blind and the humming vent. My badge still clung to my belt, though no one had scanned me in that morning. They'd used the override. HR had the authority. Across from me sat the manager. No title plate, no name introduction. Just a file, slightly too thick, opened precisely to the signature page. He didn't even glance at me when he spoke. Your conduct doesn't fit. 3 words. Final, clipped. Not even cruel, just cold. As if my presence, my personhood, was a shape misaligned with the company's blueprint. He pushed the pen forward. I knew better than to ask which conduct. That wasn't the game. Not here. Not after 2 weeks of sudden silence and one abrupt uninvite from the roadmap meeting I'd built from scratch. The NDA had already been printed on cream stock, firm to the touch, like a silent warning. There was a moment, barely perceptible, when his fingers lingered too long on the edge of the document. Not hesitation. Calculation. The clause reference in section 4.6 looked different. Or maybe I was imagining it. The typeface seemed narrower. I signed without a word. 2 people watched through the corner window. One was from security. The other held a folder upside down, but her eyes never blinked. When I left, no one looked up. Not the intern I mentored, not the colleague I once covered for during maternity leave, not even Jordan from comms, who used to call me the only human in ops. The air outside hit me like static, dry, gray, indifferent, but something kept buzzing, not in my head, in my inbox. It was a version control notification. Version 12.4.2 uploaded. Signed copy mismatch. Initiated by JL Ino Legal. That was odd. I'd signed only once. By 6:03 p.m., I was on my couch, shoes off, blouse wrinkled, my laptop open, a dull blue glow dancing over the NDA I'd scanned just in case. That's when I saw it. The footer had no date, and clause 4.6 wasn't mine. It was someone else's language, someone else's terms. But the signature was mine. I opened the original version from last week, my clean draft. Saved under final, actually final. The clause was entirely different, and dated, with the proper reference tags. And then came the notification from legal's internal system. Page 6 requested. Time, 2:42 a.m., urgency, high. Something was wrong, really wrong. I wasn't supposed to have signed that version, but I had. In front of HR, under pressure, with the eyes of a system too large to fight. Yet someone, somewhere, had noticed. They thought I wouldn't check. They forgot I wrote the version history myself. By 3:08 a.m., I was wide awake, not from fear, from precision. The kind that creeps in after years of writing contract language so tight it could cut glass and auditing NDAs for execs who couldn't spell their own job titles. I'd always been the ghost in the code, the one who'd spot a broken clause reference like a dropped stitch. They didn't expect me to audit my own exit, but I had. The document I'd signed in conference room B had one fatal flaw. It shouldn't have existed. My personal draft was marked version 12.4.3, logged, time-stamped, backed by internal sign-off. But what they gave me? Version 12.2.1, revoked 2 weeks ago, deleted from the active folder, or so they thought. Clause 4.6 in that old version included a transfer waiver, something I'd never agreed to. It allowed the company to retain internal frameworks I'd authored, even post-termination. In short, they kept my systems, without paying, without attribution. My signature made it real. Unless the version was invalid. Unless it never should have reached my hands in the first place. I sent myself an encrypted copy of both versions. Then I opened a chat window. Not Zoom, not Teams. The old app. The one legal still used to communicate during crises. Torch. I typed only one sentence to a single contact. You still tracking clause trees in archived folders? The reply came instantly. Why? Then, who gave you version 12.2.1? And finally, don't forward anything. We're already in it. The timestamp on that message was 3:19 a.m. That's when I knew this wasn't just about me. Somewhere in legal, someone panicked. They'd either sent the wrong file or sent the wrong person the right file. By 7:12 a.m., I had confirmation. A quiet flag popped up on a shared drive I wasn't supposed to access anymore, but old permissions die hard. Action. Deprecate. NDA template 12.2.1 final PDF. User. Emma Gray Legal. Note. Push too soon. Wasn't scrubbed. Push too soon? Wasn't scrubbed? They had rushed my exit. And in the rush, they'd handed me a document meant to disappear. I wasn't the only one who'd signed a revoked version. I found 3 other timestamps from the same folder. Different names, different exits, same clause, same silence. But only mine triggered a recovery request at 2:42 a.m. because only I knew what they'd done. And maybe someone in legal knew I'd notice. Maybe someone hoped I would. They buried the version, but forgot who built the grave. If you've ever signed something under pressure, you know how one clause can change everything. Follow to see what she does next, because this version isn't going quietly. By 9:00 a.m., I was back in the building. No badge, no pass, just a calm face and a coffee in hand, like I belonged. Because I used to. At the security desk, I smiled. "I'm just dropping off a document for legal," I said. No hesitation, no lie. Technically, true. The guard looked bored. Too many suits, not enough drama. He buzzed the elevator. Inside the elevator, I pressed 17, legal's floor, the place no one visited without a calendar invite and a witness. As the numbers lit up, I checked the email again. Subject, clause reference. 4.6, torch chat escalation. From JLine U legal time, 8:42 a.m. Body. Might be time to talk. Just you. Not over Zoom. That message wasn't casual. It was a breadcrumb dropped carefully in a forest full of wolves. Legal smelled like toner and stress. No one smiled here. Not even the fake kind. Just tight nods and eyes that flicked to your hands before your face. I waited in the hallway exactly 7 minutes before a young associate opened the door to a side room. Not a real office, not even a proper conference space, just a windowless corner with a screen, a folder, and 2 chairs. He didn't ask me to sit. He just said, "She'll be with you shortly." I opened the folder. They'd printed both versions. 12.2.1, the one I signed. 12.4.3, the real final. The red marks were everywhere. Signed by mistake? Clause 4.6 invalid if deprecated. Chain of custody unclear. They had started the legal panic, but quietly, internally. No alarms, no all hands, just a mess wrapped in silence. And then she walked in. Julia Lynn, Senior Counsel, Compliance and IP Retention. She wore no badge either, just calm fury in her eyes and a pen tucked behind her ear like a scalpel. "I'm not supposed to be doing this," she said, not as a warning, as a confession. I stayed silent, let her fill the air. "We were told to use 12.2.1. For you, just you, special exception." She paused. "I didn't ask why. That's my mistake." I met her eyes. "What's clause 4.6 really worth?" Julia pulled out a page I hadn't seen before, not versioned, not signed, just titled Internal Use Only Explainer for Retention, and circled in ink. Confers ownership of framework IP post-departure. Clause to be used for key dev contributors only if clean sign-off obtained. Clean sign-off meant pressure. It meant fast meetings, no lawyers, no questions. It meant me in a room being told my conduct didn't fit. "You built it," she said softly. "The rollout system, the workflow trees. They're still running on it." I didn't nod. She already knew. "They didn't want to pay licensing post-exit," she added. "So they gave you a dead version, revoked but not deleted." And then, the twist. "They didn't know I flagged the archive," she said. "I log all access, and I noticed something strange." She turned her screen toward me. 3 days ago, someone edited the archive metadata. User, MGRRK, manager, my manager, the one who slid the paper across the table. He restored 12.2.1, 3 hours before your exit interview. He didn't find an old file. He resurrected it. Julia leaned back. I can't reverse what you signed, but I can submit a note for the version control committee. Her voice dropped. If we document that clause, 4.6 was linked to a deprecated file, one that wasn't in standard rotation, we can raise a red flag across all systems using it. I exhaled. Not relief. Control. They'll push back, she added. Hard. Let them, I said. I'm not the one panicking. The rain hit hard that night, slicing against the glass like static. I watched from my apartment window, city lights blurred behind rivulets. The storm outside nothing compared to the one now swirling inside a server. Clause reference 4.6 had become radioactive. I didn't hear back from Julia that day, not by email, not on Torch, not even a read receipt, which could mean two things. Either she was preparing a formal complaint through version control committee channels, or someone had silenced her already. At 10:51 p.m., a new folder appeared in my old shared drive, one I supposedly no longer had access to. The archive IP clause review redline. Last modified. 10:42 p.m., modified by not listed. Security level, red tag. Red tags weren't common. They were reserved for documents involving legal vulnerabilities, cases where exposure might trigger external liability or reputational fallout. Why would clause 4.6 end up there? Because Julia had moved it. She hadn't vanished. She had escalated. The next morning, I made coffee too strong to drink and turned on the news out of habit. Nothing. No leaks, no lawsuits. But when I opened my inbox, there it was. A calendar invite. No subject, no sender, just an address. 6th floor, North Building, Conef Room 0. I'd never heard of it. The 6th floor of the North Building was usually dark, used for long-term storage and ghost projects that never made it past Phase 2. I arrived early. The corridor buzzed with a kind of power most employees never sensed, unseen friction, like systems negotiating behind drywall. Inside Conference Room 0, 3 people were already seated. Julia was one. Next to her, a man I didn't know, wearing a legal badge that said Observer. And across the table, he was there. The manager who had said I didn't fit, now wearing a suit too perfect for his level. He looked up when I walked in, not surprised, not nervous, just annoyed. "This is informal," he said. "No recordings, no representation." Julia didn't blink. "She's here to confirm the file discrepancy, that's all." He slid a laptop toward me, one file open. Version 12.2.1, the one I'd signed. Except this copy, this very specific copy, had no metadata, no timestamp, no chain of custody, just a PDF. "You're showing me a copy," I said. "Not the one I signed, not the one from the archive." Silence. Then the observer cleared his throat. "She's right. There's no retention chain on this file." And then Julia dropped the pin. "I ran the log this morning," she said. "The clause was edited after her signature was affixed." The room froze. Edited after signature? That wasn't a mistake. That was forgery. The manager's jaw flexed. "We've reached out to IT to review the version trail," he said carefully. "Until then, I suggest we avoid assumptions." I leaned forward. "You mean the assumption that I wouldn't notice? Or the one where you thought no one would escalate this?" His silence said enough. I stood. Not to leave. To tower. "You wanted quiet. You gave me paperwork. But I'm built from process. You tried to erase a version, then used it to keep what wasn't yours." I turned to Julia. "Log my clause under contested retention. Force the flag." She nodded. "No system using this clause will be able to deploy until review is complete." Which meant any rollout using my frameworks would stall. Deadlines, launches, stakeholder demos, frozen, all because of one clause, one version, one woman they thought would sign and disappear. By Friday morning, the clause had gone viral, but only inside legal. The public wouldn't hear a word. Not yet. But within the company's internal systems, clause reference 4.6 was now tagged with a hold status escalated under review. That alone meant chaos. You don't pause half a dozen product rollouts just because a line of text feels suspicious. You do it when that line could get you sued. Or worse, audited. They didn't say my name in the group chats, but I saw the traffic spike on the archived Confluence page I'd authored. 2,181 views in under 12 hours. It used to average 6. 3 of those were mine. At 11:03 a.m., I got the call, not from Julia, from a partner, not internal, external. "Ms. Salas," he said, polite, brisk. "I'm calling him regarding an intellectual property issue brought to our attention through one of our compliance channels." I didn't answer immediately, because no one outside was supposed to know, which meant someone inside had made a move, either to protect me or to protect themselves. "I'm not pursuing a claim," I said. "Understood," he replied. But the moment Clause 4.6 entered into a hold status and systems linked to it became discoverable under internal review, it became traceable. Your name is tied to multiple framework patents flagged as derivative. I nearly dropped the phone. Derivative? No one had ever said that word aloud before. Derivative frameworks imply origin, and origin implies ownership. Later that day, Julia messaged through Torch. Just a single phrase. "It's spreading faster than expected. They're backtracking." She attached a screenshot. "Version Control Committee status. Clause 4.6 flagged. Related clauses 5.2, 3.9 under conditional review. Affected systems. 18. Deployment hold active. Author attribution. Pending author attribution." They were starting to ask who wrote it all, and once they asked that question, the rest unraveled on its own. I received a second call, this time from an unknown number, voicemail only. "We'd like to discuss an offboarding clarification. Please contact HR's transitional counsel team at your earliest." They were scrambling, because once a clause is proven invalid and its source metadata contradicts managerial access, the liability doesn't fall on the signer. It boomerangs straight back to whoever pushed the version. But I wasn't finished yet. At 3:47 p.m., I submitted a quiet entry into the retention protest queue, a seldom used feature in our compliance portal, meant for cases where digital signatures had been misused across version histories. Few knew it even existed. I'd helped write it 6 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. By sundown, I was exhausted, not from the battle, from the patience it took not to gloat. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity, a system forced to look itself in the eye. I sat down with a pen and started writing, not for them, for the record, for the paper trail. Because when you build the road, you know where all the exits are. By Monday, they had stopped pretending. No more HR emails about transitioning gracefully. No more calendar invites disguised as offboarding check-ins. No more silence either. At 10:06 a.m., the company's internal bulletin board posted something unheard of. Notice, temporary delay in rollouts for systems R49, Nexus 3, and Echo Drive. Due to ongoing clause review and source attribution processes, multiple infrastructures have been temporarily paused for legal compliance verification. Further updates to follow. No names, no blame. But everyone inside already knew who was behind it. I watched from a cafe 2 blocks away, sipping burnt espresso and pretending not to smile. They wanted the version revoked, quietly buried. Instead, it had fractured the architecture of half their systems. Not because I fought back, because they tried to erase me, and you can't erase the author when the system was built in her syntax. My phone buzzed again. Julia. Torch message. FYI, manager's access pulled. Clause audit escalated to exec level. That fast? I blinked. Not because I was shocked. Because he had underestimated everyone. He hadn't just tried to slip me a bad version. He'd manually restored a deprecated one, bypassed automated logging, or so he thought, and then pressured a senior-level contributor to sign it without disclosure. Now the version control committee had evidence of clause tampering, with intent. That's not just a policy violation. That's career-ending behavior. At 2:23 p.m., I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in over a year. Nadia V, we'd worked together on the original rollout team. She was brilliant, underused, and disappeared after a project implosion last spring. Just saw the freeze notice. That clause was yours, wasn't it? You warned them 2 years ago about version security. They laughed. Not laughing now. I stared at the screen. Nadia had been silenced too, in her own way. Now she was watching the system cough up what it tried to swallow whole. Late that night, another torch ping. Julia again, but not a message. A file. Clause 4.6. Retraction NAS prep v1.docx. I opened it, read the title block, then reread the author line. Author J. Lin and E. Salas. Quote, joint review for clause, sunset status, draft for legal submission. I almost didn't breathe. Sunsetting a clause wasn't just rare, it was a formal admission of fault. A way for a company to walk back a trap door they pretended never existed. And this time, they'd left my name where it belonged, at the top. The document was surgical. Each clause broken down, each misuse mapped to deployment logs, each edit time-stamped, fingerprinted, named. Julia had included 3 other NDA cases with similar manipulations, different employees, same tricks, same manager. I wasn't the only one, but I might be the last, because this time someone flagged it before it disappeared. As I closed the file, I realized this wasn't personal vengeance. This was removal of rot from inside the walls. And it started with one signature, one revoked version, one woman who read what she signed. Tuesday morning came soft and gray. A low cloud ceiling pressed over the city like someone had smothered the sun in damp wool. I liked it, the quiet before things cracked. At exactly 9:01 a.m., my phone vibrated once. No message, no app, just one calendar notification. Retention hearing, clause 4.6, special session. Location, exec confirm. 1A attendees E. Salas, J. Lin, R.K. manager, CCO, GC status, closed door. Closed door meant no notes, no press, and no hiding. I took the train in silence, watching buildings glide past like data points, structured, sharp, unaware they were part of a collapsing system. Conference room 1A was on the top floor. Glass, marble, soundproof everything, usually reserved for acquisition talks or lawsuits with too many zeros. Julia met me by the door. Her face was unreadable, calm but tired. They'll try to discredit the flag, she whispered, but the clause is cornered. Don't flinch. Inside the room was colder than usual. The chief compliance officer sat at the head, general counsel beside him. And across from us, my manager, R.K. He didn't look at me. He looked at Julia, like she was the betrayal, not me. Let's begin, the CCO said, not unkindly. This hearing is to assess whether Clause 4.6, as deployed in NDA version 12.2.1, constitutes a misapplication of deprecated legal language with potential operational consequences. Legal speak for, did you mess with the wrong document to steal someone's work? Julia opened with her summary, version trail, chain of custody logs, clause discrepancies, screenshots, metadata comparisons. They let her speak for 8 minutes uninterrupted. Then the CCO turned to me. Ms. Salas, your name appears on the original framework language associated with R49, Nexus 3, and Echo Drive. Do you confirm authorship? I do. And did you consent to clause 4.6 in version 12.2.1 at the time of signature? No, I said. I didn't even know I was signing that version. Were you aware the version was deprecated? I wasn't shown the version history. RK finally spoke. She had access to version logs. She built them. If she had concerns, she could have raised them in the moment. I looked him in the eye. The room went still. You mean, while I was being terminated without counsel, with HR watching? Silence. GC cleared his throat. Mr. K, were you aware that version 12.2.1 was deprecated prior to its presentation? He hesitated. Too long. Not directly, he said. The file was presented to me as compliant. That's when Julia pulled out the final nail, a printed log, access record from 3 days before I was terminated, restoration request. User, MGRRK action, recovered deprecated file, note, needs silent sign-off. The GC paled. The CCO exhaled. RK said nothing. The hearing ended without a verdict. It wasn't that kind of meeting. But when I walked out, Julia leaned over. They'll freeze him out, she said quietly. Soft exit, NDA offer, internal investigation. He won't survive this quarter. And the clause? Being sunset as we speak. Your name's on the revision. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed again. A new email. Subject? Attribution Notice Body. Per review, framework language attributed to E. Salas has been registered in compliance systems under origin ownership. Clause 4.6 deactivated. Retention control transferred. I stared at the screen. The company hadn't apologized, but it had admitted the truth. Quietly, bureaucratically, completely. That was enough. Because I didn't need headlines. I needed the system to correct itself. And it had. The days that followed moved like static. Sharp, silent, full of friction. No fireworks, no statements. Just absence. RK was gone. No farewell email, no all-hands departure note. His name disappeared from the directory at 2:13 p.m. on a Wednesday. No one said anything. But the company said everything in what it didn't say. They issued a policy memo the next day. Effective immediately, all exit documentation must include visible version history and chain of custody log confirmation to be reviewed by a second legal officer before presentation. A new line at the bottom. Clause reference integrity required at signature point. I read it twice, then once more, not because I didn't understand, but because it was my language. They had taken my voice and finally signed their name under it. In the world of compliance, that's a revolution. Small, silent, irreversible. A clause lives in the shadows until it doesn't, until someone drags it into the fluorescent light and says, "This isn't legal, this is leverage." I didn't go back to my old office. There was nothing to go back to. I didn't want revenge. I wanted repair. And strangely, I got it. An email landed in my inbox from the Office of the General Counsel. "We'd like to offer you an opportunity to consult on our framework for author attribution protocols. Your experience in IP-sensitive environments has surfaced a blind spot we're now actively correcting." It wasn't an apology. It was better. It was an invitation to shape the thing they once tried to bury me under. I thought about saying no. I really did. But as I sat on the roof of a friend's building, evening wind cutting through the concrete hush of the city, I realized something. Some fights aren't about winning. They're about writing things down right, so no one else has to fight for the same sentence. I typed only one line in response. Let's start with clause transparency during termination, and go from there. Within 5 minutes, they sent a draft agenda. Julia would be in the room. So would 2 others. Names I didn't recognize yet. I would. 3 weeks later, my name appeared in the System Documentation Index as Primary Contributor Attribution Protocol 1.0. Not big, not loud, but permanent. Next to it, a link to Clause 4.6 Sunset Rationale Report. I clicked it. Scanned to the last paragraph. Version 12.2.1 was revoked prior to presentation. Misapplication caused retention anomalies. The review triggered by this discrepancy led to full procedural reform. Attribution formally restored. There it was. Beneath the legal tone, the bullet points, the passive voice, an entire collapse, rewritten as a policy. And I was the footnote that changed the rulebook. People always think silence after war means peace. It doesn't. It means clarity. It means the system blinked. And this time, I blinked back. 6 weeks later, I stood at the edge of a glass table in a new building on a new floor in a room where my name was printed on the agenda. E. Salas, Contributor, Retention Reform Frameworks. It felt surreal, not because they finally acknowledged me, but because I was now helping write the rules that once erased me, and the room was listening. No more interruptions. No more nods with hidden knives, just pens scribbling my words into margins they used to keep empty. The presentation was short, deliberate. I didn't dramatize. I showed the clause flow, the version tree, the metadata discrepancies, how legal panic doesn't start with conflict. It starts with shortcuts. I paused on a single slide, the restored version, 12.2.1, highlighted. Red annotation on clause 4.6, used after revocation, incompatible with standard offboarding, and next to it, in bold, signed under non-disclosed conditioning, author unshown history trail. No one spoke for 5 seconds. Then someone from risk compliance whispered, "Jesus." Julia didn't say anything. She didn't need to. We both knew what it had cost to get that sentence into a slide deck. After the meeting, in the hallway, someone approached me quietly. She was young, new, badge still crisp, eyes too open. "You're the reason we have to double-check versions now, right?" I smiled. "You're the reason we should." She looked relieved, then added, "My onboarding NDA had a new footer. Your name was on the reference doc." I didn't answer, because I couldn't. because my throat was tighter than I expected. That night, a letter arrived at my apartment. Not an email, not a call, a printed letter from legal. We are formally acknowledging that NDA version 12.2.1 was presented in error. We accept that the use of Clause 4.6 post-deprecation violated procedural integrity. As a result of your documentation, reporting, and collaboration, we have corrected internal policy and implemented irreversible version tracking protocols. There was no gift, no settlement, no money, just language, and for the first time, it was right. I framed the letter. Not out of pride, out of memory, so that when the next version of someone like me signs something under pressure, they'll know what to ask, what to check, what not to accept. Because buried in page 6 of some document somewhere is a clause just waiting to be weaponized. And now, there's a line that stops it, one I helped write. I don't walk through the main lobby anymore, not because I can't, because I don't need to. There's a back entrance on the east side of the building. Quiet, shadowed by the loading dock, where the badge reader still pings with the same familiar tone. But now, the system says, "Welcome, External Advisor Salas." No department, no manager, just one name, mine. I don't sit at the same desk either. They offered one, glass walls, adjustable lighting, ergonomic everything. I declined. Now I sit where I like. In meeting rooms, on balconies, sometimes on the 9th floor where the interns work. They don't ask questions. They ask for templates, because they all use the new onboarding clause checklist, the one with the bold red banner at the top. Version control confirmation required. No signature valid without traceable metadata. Underneath it, a small footnote. Protocol 4.6.1, Attribution Safeguard developed by E. Salas. They call it the Salas Clause. They laugh when they say it, but no one dares skip it, and that's enough. Julia still pings me sometimes. Mostly one-word messages. Saw this? They changed it. We won. Last week, she sent me a photo. A printed NDA with a side-by-side version history printed on the first page above the signature line. In marker, someone had written, "Let's not get 4.6. That's what it means now." To get 4.6 Nawaya to be handed a lie in legal formatting, and now it's a punchline, not a practice. I keep the original in a folder, the real 12.2.1, not the forged one, not the cleaned one, the one I signed, with the wrong clause and the right instinct. I look at it sometimes, not with anger, with precision. A reminder that systems fail exactly where they're too confident, where no one's watching, where someone assumes silence means consent. But silence is just a breath before the correction. They still don't know who leaked the clause trace to risk, who sent the flagged version to audit, who opened the version control logs to outside counsel. I never told them. I never will. Because sometimes justice doesn't need a spotlight. Sometimes it just needs a paper trail. Now, when someone leaves quietly, when they're handed papers with cold eyes and fast pens, I know something's changed. The clause is cleaner. The signature is traceable, the pressure documented, and maybe, just maybe, someone at the table remembers the name of the one who read the fine print.